you know, like,
Welcome to the Ladies' Room, where politics meets women's issues, and we're not here to sugarcoat anything. We're diving headfirst into the stories that matter to women, from Washington power plays to battles over our basic rights. It's bold, it's unapologetic, and yeah, it's going to get messy. Because let's face it, the fight for equality always is. Grab a drink, pull up a chair, and let's get into it. This is the Ladies' Room.
well, hello. Happy Sunday and happy Thanksgiving. What am I talking? St. Patrick's Day. I'm Allison, the mighty librarian.
I'm Vagabondia, librarian loose in the
And
wild.
she's let loose in the wild. So we're coming on today because some stuff happened with libraries in the past few days, and we really wanted to talk about it. So let's get into it. So if I could get... So Trump signed an executive order pretty much dismantling, and I'm trying to pull it up right here. Give me 1 second. And basically, it is getting rid of the legislation that makes the Institute of Museum and Library Services. That's the big chunk of meat that is really alarming to education in a lot of ways. But it also dismantles quite a bit of funding in these other agencies. And, unfortunately, these agencies don't really describe exactly what they do and how they help. So we'll break that down for quite a bit. But what I titled in the thumbnail is just the drastic starkness of elimination to its fullest extent is pretty much what it says. So yeah, we're going to talk about that right now. Now, the Institute of Librarians and Museums is actually legislation, and let me get this up really quick.
And Allison, from what I'm reading, all 7 of the agencies he went after were created by acts of Congress. So technically, Congress can step up and say, nah, sir, but whether they will or not.
Right, yeah, it's all, and the monies have already been, like every other thing he's trying to get rid of, they're already funded for the year, for this fiscal year. So technically, they really aren't supposed to be able to say Trump as the executor of the country is supposed to execute the laws that have already been passed. And this money has already been appropriated and passed for these programs and initiatives. So these are just some of the laws, and I put the link to this website that I'm on in the description. But these are all acts of Congress and appropriated funding. So it's not like it's some pet project that got some random funding somewhere here or there. Like these are legitimate laws that call for these institutes and programs and scholarships that are made available. So I think what we really wanted to talk about, and we were just talking about this before we went live, was why does this matter? Like, all right, libraries, museums, scholarships, who gives a fuck? And the thing is that librarians, I know, especially in academia where I work, we do not do a good job of why the library is important, why it matters to you. And everybody hates facts and figures, but you got to hear some facts and figures on this one, because I've been saying for years that the GOP is trying to make you dumb and stupid and broke. And this is how they're going to do it. Libraries and museums are more than just checking out a book. And if you hear somebody say, or even if you've said yourself, well, they can just get it online. They can just get it on Amazon. That's real elitist because no, you can't. You can't just get a lot of this shit online. A lot of it's paywalled, first of all. Librarians break down the paywall for people and give you access to information that normally isn't accessible because you have to pay for it. Not everybody has $10, $20, $30 for a book. Not everybody has that. And so if you have a choice of $20 for a book or $20 for to put food on the table, you can't eat a book. And I respect that choice. Don't get me wrong, but that's why libraries exist. Go since the founding of this country. Go read up on Franklin if you don't believe me. Libraries exist to educate the public, to keep them educated. Because that's if you want a healthy society, democratic, small d democratic society, libraries help facilitate that. So since when was it? Probably 2020 was the big push. Maybe 2021 was the big push to start to destroy libraries, and it starts with the transgender books, or the gays. They're all worried about drag queen story hour, and then it just slowly but surely, and it doesn't make news because you know what? I get it. There's a lot of problems, and sometimes book banning isn't really top on your list, but it really should be in at least the top 5 of important issues because, and we're going to go over how this is related to your kitchen table. And some of you watching, I see y'all in the chat, and I'm so glad you could, hop on and join us. You already know this, but lots of people don't really understand how it affects the kitchen table, not just your, the country, but your own even. And we take these things for granted because they've, at least my generation, I'm an older millennial or a young Gen Xer. They've always been a part of society and culture. No matter where you are, there's a library, and it was always treasured. But they're really trying to rip this stuff away, not to save money. That the savings you're going to get from getting rid of libraries is minuscule, comparatively speaking, in the whole grand scheme of the budget. This saves almost nothing for the government. It really does. And it by the GOP in particular having this elitist attitude towards, libraries themselves are not the elitist thing. It's when you hear somebody say you can just get it online, that's the elitist attitude. Because that assumes also that you have the money to pay to get online in the first place. And I mean, the Infrastructure Act that Biden pushed reserved money for rural areas that still don't have there are places in the richest country in the world that do not have broadband access. So they either have to rely on their rural library or dial up. Some people still use dial up to connect, guys. That's a thing still. So I've been talking a lot. Vagabondia, why don't you, you had some really good points that you were mentioning too.
No, what's really interesting is that he passed this just before midnight, the same night that they were voting on the budget. This was very much an attempt to slip it under the radar. In fact, there were no news stories about it until the next morning. So, nobody knew about it until it was starting to be revealed. And the agencies that are tackled are all ones that disproportionately impact vulnerable populations. Obviously, the library actions that we're talking about that are so important for rural and small libraries, but museums, which are this incredible conduit for history and art and culture, all tied together. It's so much more than just a painting on the wall. Like, it tells us who we are and how we got where we are now. But the other things that are attacked by this executive order are loan programs for minority owned businesses, and the only federal agency that works on homelessness, and the Woodrow Wilson Center, which does global politics and things like that. Like, this is really going after ordinary people's ability to access information and protect themselves. Allison, in the private chat, I sent you the links to the two articles the Kaufman Chronicle's done so far on this. I can't post it to the regular chat, but it outlines what agencies were affected and what they do.
Okay, let me get some of those up. So yeah, I think that's a lot of really great points. Is museums? I was mentioning this before we went live that a lot of people hear museum and they think fine art, hoity-toity. Who cares about artistic classics? And I really get it. I get it. But that's not a vast majority of museums aren't just about fine art. It's natural history, it's history of your state, town. I mean, our town's museum is really quite impressive. It doesn't just go, oh, it's not just art. In fact, most of the exhibits in our museum are rotating. So there is a somewhat of a permanent collection, and a lot of it focuses on Civil War, type collection stuff, people of the Civil War, but not just like the Confederate big names. Like they're about like bringing context of what was going on here at the time, why these things were valued, and why these people were considered important. They give a lot of context of why, but it also has this awesome and I was like, this is gonna be stupid. I was wrong because there's this like maze type exhibit where you start at like the first settlers, European-esque settlers of the town, and the Native American tribes, and the interactions between those two, and it goes all the way through present day, and a lot of I'm not trying to get any doxing of exactly where I live, but a lot of historical things. I live in, y'all know I live in Georgia, so Coca-Cola has a big part to play in. There's several towns in Georgia that Coca-Cola plays a big part in, but it's not just about art. It's about history. And art, you made a really good point. Art reflects the culture of the time and what's important and what is going on in an expressive way. I mean, art, if you look at the generic periods of art from, cave painting to modern, art made yesterday, it's about what's important and cared about and what people are going through. And it tells you a lot about culture. And I saw this article somewhere. It was basically an attack on empathy is really what they're getting at. And museums, libraries, education in general builds empathy. Think about why you feel certain ways about certain people, in a constructive manner. It's usually because you learned about it or knew someone, throughout your either childhood, adulthood. When you know somebody, it's hard to hate somebody that and that's why divide and conquer is such a big part of authoritarian takeover. The more you can demonize your neighbor, the less likely you can band together to oppose the authoritarian. So that's my roundabout way of saying that it's not just about a book it's not just about a building. These things matter to communities because it's how they get information. And some states like Idaho refuse to give money to bring broadband to their communities. Why would you refuse internet and critical internet access to your state? That can be game changing for people. If they have access to broadband, they can go online, they can start online side hustles, they can why would you? And there's only really one explanation. go ahead.
Yeah, Allison, I think that's exactly the point. Skip points out that the English fascism of the 70s and 80s is what created punk and metal. I mean, art is an outlet to express yourself. It's a huge means of resistance and shaping the cultural narrative, and controlling that is huge. And he's also gone after the arts community in general. I mean, they took over the Kennedy Center. He's named ambassadors to Hollywood. I mean, this is Hitler 101. You control all
Yeah.
of the media and all of the art, and what you make it all patriotic, you make it all glorifying a certain message. I mean, think about Song of the South, what that did, what that movie did to reframe the entire argument about the Civil War. There's power in that, and how we think about things and how we talk about things using art, particularly the mass media type objects, and they're effectively trying to control all of those. And so, telling museums you can only get grants and funding if you highlight the topics we want you to, or if you use the perspective we want you to amplify. It's controlling the population and how it thinks about itself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, Thank you, Derek, for putting those links. I got the links from Leah and then reposted them in the private chat. That only I'm sorry. Oh, I'm such a. I thought I was posting them in the public chat. So thank you for taking care of that, because this is why I can't walk and chew gum. So, um, but yeah, that's enough. Like, music, especially, really reflects, um, what's going on in in the world, almost. Like, I think about Green Day right after 9/11. Like, there's this huge, right after 9/11, and I had that too, being a New Yorker. The natural patriotism of, like, banding together that it brought. But I feel like they're almost geniuses in their own right, because looking back on it in hindsight, I can see exactly what they were talking about. But, like, it never dawned on me of what we were, until it was much later, obviously, of what was, like, how we reacted, and the foolishness that we as a country went into that, and how it turned into this awful, like, why were the fuck did we go into Iraq type? I know why we did, but as a country, probably a lot of people who don't follow politics were, why are we in Iraq? Weapons of weapons. Where are the weapons of mass destruction? So
And Allison, think about all the protest music of the 60s and the 70s. I mean, there's a reason why
mhm,
the older generation always hates the music of the newer generation. It's because they're talking about ideas they're not comfortable with. We've always done it. We've done it with jazz. We've done it with
absolutely,
punk. We've done it with rock. We've done it with Rage Against the Machine. Like, there's a
yeah,
reason why our parents hated it. It's because it was telling the truth they didn't want us to talk about.
yeah. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. And I have to, I wonder, and, like, this might be a thought experiment for anybody listening to do with their parents. If they don't, I don't actually know the answer for my parents. A lot of times they just didn't like loud, drummy, like, rah, music. Like, I don't even think they actually knew what the song was, talking about half the time. So I have to wonder if they even realized what they didn't like about it. A lot of times, like with Elvis, a lot of parents of that era, who had teenagers all like Elvis crazy, they didn't. He was like becoming a sex symbol, and that's what they didn't like. It wasn't necessarily the music, the beat, the words. It was like he was throttling his hips and thrusting them. So I'd be curious to ask my parents, like, why did you get all bent when I'm like playing? I don't know why Green Day is the only one like popping into my head, but like Nirvana, Nine Inch Nails, Smashing Pump, like all those, like, those things that I was listening to, back in the day. But
The
it
Elvis thing
it
makes me think, though, a lot of the fight against the Beatles and Elvis had to do with the sexualization, and we come from a puritanical culture, and God knows
that's
we
a good
can't talk
point.
about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, because God forbid some cute guy is like thrusting his hips on, because that's gonna make everybody love. It's Oh, we get so silly sometimes. I put in the right chat a link to a petition. Petitions I don't really think work, but they do signal support. So if you every library is a really great organization. They really help advocate for libraries along with ALA. They're a little less controversial than ALA, so I think in recent years they're a little bit more effective because they're not looked at, like a lot of red states view ALA as a Marxist organization, because of course they do, but um, so if you consider just adding your name to it just to send the barometer that it's not, I'm sure that's helpful. Do what you
Allison,
can
I
where you
wanted to
can.
amplify. I wanted to amplify something you were saying about rural libraries in particular. So the way, and this is a little inside baseball on library land, but the way the Institute of Museum and Library Services works is the money for libraries goes to state libraries, and then there's also some grants that we can apply for. But the money that goes to states sometimes is then divvied down to the public libraries. Um, but often it has to do with state funding. But if they don't get the federal funding, then they take it from the state funding. You get the whole picture. But the reason this is so important in rural and small libraries is like in a towns like where we live, there's not a bookstore for over an hour, um, and broadband is spotty in places. There are places in this county where I don't even have cell service. And so access to just things like applying for a job or working on your resume or um, applying for Social Security or applying for benefits, that's happening at the local library because that's where you consistently have internet service. And particularly for our older generation that may not be comfortable with technology, it's where there's someone there to help them navigate that whole chain as well. And for us, because our human services departments are in our county seat downtown, which may be 45 minutes or more away from where they live, the local library is easier than them going all the way into town if they even have transportation. And it's only open like 9 to 5. So when they need help with that, they need the place that's open longer hours. And in our area, the library is a community gathering space. A few of our libraries are our polling locations. They're also our warming and cooling stations in the event of an emergency. Um, they're where a lot of community dialogue happens because the only places to gather in towns like this is the fucking bar where no one is talking about the real shit that's going
Right.
on that they need help with. So it's more than just the latest romance novel or the latest mystery novel that someone wants to read. It's also about learning about the things they need to make their daily life easier and connecting them to
That's
those
a really good
services.
point. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm really glad that you have the public library perspective because, I'm in academia. So our money comes from lots of different other sources of federal funding, but not necessarily. Actually, I don't think we take from this pot of money. We're like in a different pot of money. Plus, we can take donations from like alumni. We don't have that kind of library, but that's how academic library is. There's grants, not necessarily from this pot of money that's gone, and then whatever we don't get federally, the state funds, and usually it trickles to the university, and then the university budgets it out for us. Um, but someone in the chat, I caught the comment. I don't think I could find it again, but you know, even it like I don't know what the numbers are for public libraries, but in academia, if you just go to the library as a college student once a week, just enter the building and study, your GPA is 30% higher and you're much more likely to graduate. RPG is that's the for colleges and universities, RPG retention, progression, graduation. So staying in school, progressing through your degree program, and graduating is what RPG is. That's the big stat that everybody wants higher. So RPG goes way high just by walking into the library. And then when you have programs, you have uh, services, it increases exponentially of student success rates. So I'm sure it's something similar in public libraries, but I don't
Right.
know if
In
there's a measurable metric for that. But
Right. In public libraries, it's tied to literacy. So, adult literacy and early literacy because of story time and things like that, particularly in communities that may not have access to Head Start or where Head Start is funded in
right.
a limited capacity, the library often becomes preschool and fulfills that function. So, early literacy numbers are a big indicator for us. And then adult literacy becomes a big factor because before, well, of course, education being destroyed now is a factor, but we do lifelong learning. We call it cradle to grave. So we have a literacy program that serves our county and a neighboring county that only does adult. And there's a surprising number of people that are not literate in this day and age. And
Absolutely.
they're just now, if they can and have the time and the willingness, have access to adult literacy programs and so forth. Um, so that's a big the other thing is return on investment. So the numbers from IMLS show that the return on investment for public libraries is like for every dollar spent on public library, a community gets
Yes.
back gets back like over $10, depending on the community, in economic growth, in all these various factors that are very important for a community. And they have found
Yes.
that when there's not a if there when there's not a vibrant local library in a community, their literacy rates are down and their economic development is down. Like it can be one of the biggest predictors of community growth.
Yeah, I can't believe I forgot about. I had some numbers for this for something else. I'd have to. I don't know where I put them, but no, like when your community has a library, your economic numbers all go up. Your literacy rates, which translates into economic, eventually, because if you can't read properly, know, it leads to less crime. I remember the Library of Democracy did um, article about this in the reference point publication that I do. So your housing prices go up too, because on average, your home will be worth $9,000 to $10,000 more on average. Obviously, depending on state, city, wherever you are. If your community has a library on, your house will sell for more. Um, and there's just a whole slew of economic numbers that will go up, all because having access to information, a place to work, a place to like gather with other people to create things, create businesses, jobs, movements, whatever it is. It's a space where information can flow and ideas can flow. And whatever those ideas lead to is, something different. One other thing I wanted to add to uh, with school libraries and literacy rates, you know what else? I don't know if this is the entire country. This is definitely true in Georgia. How they determine how many prison cells they'll need is they look at third grade reading test scores. And that there's some formulation with that number that they can tell with some level of reliability of how many prison cells they'll need in the next like 10, 20, 30 years. Isn't that wild? Like that's just what. So it is cheaper. And there's lots of programs that have done this. It is cheaper to send someone to college than to incarcerate them. And I forgot how many years they have to be incarcerated for. It is cheaper to send somebody to get a 4-year degree than to incarcerate them for like, I think it's a really low number of years too. Like, imagine if we reimagined like what prison looks like, instead of just a cycle of in and out, never ever, you're never square with the house once you leave prison because you have that black mark on your record that you committed a felony, regardless of what it is. You have a stain on your record and your life is 10 times harder. So then, like, just trying to get a job that pays a livable wage. You can try to get a minimum wage job once you're out of prison or go back to, like, let's say you went in for dealing drugs. What are you gonna do? You know, what work minimum wage, making pennies, barely able to feed yourself, nevertheless a family, or take a chance at doing what you did to make several thousand. I don't know how much drugs make, but I know it's a lot more than minimum wage, you know.
Well, and Tiki makes the connection that's absolutely true. It's the for profit. The for profit prison system makes the school to prison pipeline profitable. And so they want to keep a certain portion of the population uneducated, disenfranchised, everything else. So they end up in jail because the private prisons make money, and then they donate to political candidates who make more laws that make it even more difficult
Let me
for
tell
people
you,
to overcome that.
let me tell you about prison in Georgia that I've learned, not from personal experience. I'm not there, obviously, but like if I want, like they feed them next to nothing. And granted, my husband is in jail. Most of you already know that. He has not even had a bail hearing yet, and it's been several months. He's not had a bond hearing, and if his father didn't buy him a good attorney, he wouldn't have spoken to an attorney yet. So these people in this jail have not been tried and convicted and proven beyond a reasonable doubt that they deserve to be in jail. This is where you go. This is like purgatory. And most people in that jail do not have an attorney. They're waiting for their state appointed one, or their court appointed one. So there's that element to it. So they feed them next to nothing. And I get it, jail's not supposed to be fun, but you know what? These people have not been proven guilty yet, beyond a reasonable doubt. We still have rule of law, apparently, in this country still. So there's that element to it. Then, so you can send like these, you can put money on their commissary account, and so they can pay like triple the price for a pack of ramen noodles, or, you know, other kinds of junk that won't be any nutrition, but it'll make them feel fuller. You can spend $40 on a pack of overpriced ramen, and it's not like the jail has a bunch of people putting ramen packs together. It's from a company that does this. If you want your loved one to be able to call you, you have to put money on their account so that they can call you, so it's not a collect call on your phone line. Do you know, like, it is like 50 cents a minute. Like, no joke. It is ridiculous how expensive these things are. So if you don't have the money, your loved one ain't getting phone calls, or, you know, and I'm not saying that they should necessarily be paid for, but the for-profit part isn't just the actual prison. There are services that are outsourced that are, it is wild. It's just wild what, like, you know, your prison experience can be a very different one in Georgia, depending on which prison you're at and which companies they allow to be there, you know, to provide some service or whatever. And, you know, even before I knew enough about literacy in prisons, it is remarkable how many prisoners, you know, people in the prison system that have been tried, convicted, and now they're serving their time, do not know how to read. And a lot of the reason why they don't know how to read is, you know, a lot of the reason why they're in prison, because they're usually can't get a good paying job if you can't read all that. There's a really good TED talk from San Quentin prison where a guy talks about his experience of how he ended up there, and he created this financial literacy program for inmates so that they, you know, start to learn to read and become educated. It's a really great, just Google TEDx San Quentin financial literacy, and you'll find the inmate that gave the TED talk there. But anyway, that's a really roundabout way of saying we can either fund prison that is usually twice, 3 times as expensive, instead of maybe educating these people. And it really goes to show you where the corruption is in like, you know, there's obvious corruption that we see daily. Just in a headline, you can see the corruption. but it trickles down into nooks and crevices of like the not a whole lot of people will see it in the prison system. You prevent kids from learning to read. They fill the jail cells that, regardless if they're filled or not, the state is paying for some states are now outsourcing the actual facility. And you can see where the corruption is going to connect easily and where it already has started. Where it could have all been salvaged if you just funded the fucking library and helped these kids learn to read. You wouldn't have, but I bet you soon you know what? I bet it already exists. Somebody prove me right on this. I bet there's a for-profit prison lobby that advocates for anti-education initiatives so they can fill their prisons up more.
That's the whole point. Like the cuts to the Department of Education, the attacks on public service loan forgiveness, the attacks on libraries, the attacks on museums, it's all to dumb down the population. So you're either in jail and the private prisons are making money, or you're working a low paying job where you have no rights to unionize and strike for better working conditions, and you are just trying to survive. So you certainly can't ever thrive and rise up. I mean, they're cutting all those ladders to the American dream so that we're just down here. It's feudalism again. We're down here to do their labor for them while they make the money.
Yeah, actually, that is a great segue into something I wanted to go into, which I know we hate facts and figures, but this is an important factor to show people. Hold on, let me get it up. So it says, show this chart to anyone who says college isn't worth it. I'm sure a lot of you already know college is worth it. This was data from 2023. A lot of times this type of data is at least a year and a half, 2 years behind what the data is now. So this is probably the most current information out there. But I could be wrong. But so this is where you are with a high school diploma, median $36,000, a bachelor's degree, average is $60,000. So that right there, that's a big gap. So if you cut off college opportunities, which this latest, going back to what this whole episode is about, this shows you alone that cutting scholarship and education opportunities, in higher education opportunities, this gap goes even higher, because if there's no opportunity, if nobody even knows that these opportunities exist, you're going to stay at this. And this is where companies want us all to be, at this medium low ball range of 36K. If we don't know any better, how can we make more money or demand that we make more money? So I'm not going to go through obviously this whole article, but I can copy it and if you're into the data. But there's your kitchen table. Banning books, library bans, it's important. This does affect your bottom line. Another one, this is some old data, but nonetheless, it's striking to begin with. This is from the Social Security website, and it's from 2015, which sometimes government data really is that far behind, especially if it was obtained from a census. But this is returns on educational investment. So, there's a big difference, especially between men and women. Gender, I think, is a lot bigger of a deal. Is this? Oh, this one is one of the ones I also want. The Bureau of Labor Statistics. Education pays. This is probably census data that came out around 2021. This is weekly earnings with different degree programs. So yeah, less than a high school diploma is really dismal. High school diploma, and then it goes up through the increasing levels of degrees. So it does pay to go to college. Now, with that said, I'm a huge advocate also in college is not everything. College is, I just, uh, hold on, let me get us back. College is not always for everybody. College is not necessary for every profession you want to go in. But advanced education after high school, you need it. Whether it's an apprenticeship for a trade, community college, beauty school, whatever it is, you're not gonna get anywhere on just a high school diploma anymore. It's just like that's just the reality of it. And
Well, and even for
they
the
want
technical
you,
programs, you need the high school education, and you need to be able to read, and you need to be able to write, and you need to be able to reason to a certain level. And in many of them, you need to be able to do basic math or sometimes even advanced math. You need that basic foundational education, including graduation, to succeed in those fields as well.
yeah. So I get kind of cringed when like I hear we shouldn't really care about banning books in libraries. It's not about the book so much. I mean, some of it is obviously, but a lot of it is they're taking away money you could be earning by preventing you from learning that you could earn it. Some people, Sarah Blakely, she invented Spanx. She couldn't, when she was patenting Spanx, she couldn't afford a lawyer. So what did she do? She went to the library and learned how to draft up like 90% of the patent. She just learned how to do it through books and all that kind of stuff. And then she spent like, I think $1,000 on an attorney to do like the really legalese stuff that you need law school for. So otherwise, a patent attorney can cost you tens of thousands of dollars. Depending on what you're trying to patent, it can even go into hundreds of thousands of dollars. So like, even just inventing something and making sure nobody steals your shit, your idea that could make you millions and billions of dollars would be restricted from you. And that's your kitchen table. Your potential to learn and do something for yourself and your family, it just gets robbed from you. And it gets robbed from your community. And you're going to try to sell your house. Well, guess what? Not having a library matters to people. And if they can find a house near a library, like especially got kids, you know what I'm saying? So it does. These things do affect your bottom line. It's not just about like story time or kids reading, or certainly that is like probably the most important part, but it's usually the most part that gets dismissed. If that doesn't bother you, then think about it like you're not able to access information that elite people will be able to. You know, it they're trying to diminish your ability to move up economically. And that should piss everybody off. They want to keep you down.
Yeah,
So,
and that's part of this executive order was the attack on those grant programs for small businesses and minority-owned businesses, which they include women within that group. Um, the rates, the reason that agency is necessary is because the approval rates for minorities and women is already lower for small businesses. They're already charged a higher interest rate, and they're already more likely to be they're already more likely to be denied a grant or a loan for a small business. So even if if you can't afford the education, but you decide to make a small business instead, they're putting more obstacles in your way there. In addition to the ones that already exist, but also removing this agency that has ways of helping you with those things to help overcome those hurdles.
yeah, I put up the executive order language of what gets cut. And I love how they keep very vague on what is, being cut instead of they put, let me shoot. Like the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, Minority Business Development Agency. So a lot of those you don't necessarily know what they actually do, and they can blame it on DEI or some bullshit racist, what it does, but it doesn't just affect, this affects whatever race you are. Because, yeah, you may not be looking for, a minority business development. You may not need help with that, but the Institute of Museum and Libraries might be something that you would want to know about, that would help you get information for something
Right, and the
that you would
Community
find.
Development Financial Institutions Fund is a source of capital for small lenders in low-income areas, ensuring families and small businesses can get needed loans. Without it, big banks would dominate and would deny more and more. So that one's not aimed specific. That one's specifically aimed at low-income areas, um, which affects a huge number of people. One of them I also wanted to mention is the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service. They help resolve labor disputes and prevent strikes. And so this is again tied into that denying workers the ability to advocate for living wages and for, safer workplaces and all of those various things. Like everything they eliminated in this executive order alone, all of them seen as a group, is denying people information that would help them better their lives, denying them access to grants and resources that would help them support their families, and then denying them the resources to fight for themselves. The most egregious to me, and of course I'm very sensitive about the library one for personal reasons and and professional reasons, is that they've gone after the only federal agency that works on homelessness. So now the resource
Yeah.
that would have helped you if you weren't able to improve your financial situation and now you're teetering toward homelessness, the federal agency that helped address that would also be gone. So, I mean, what's the end game other than to keep you dumb, uneducated, and not able to start your own business, not able to fight for your rights as a worker, and now when you're on the brink of homelessness because you can't make a living wage, there's also no one to help you. Like,
Yep.
that's brutal.
If that's not a kitchen table issue, I really don't know what is.
And at the same time, Doge cut HUD, Housing and Urban Development, and they fund a lot of grassroots efforts to combat not just homelessness, but also low income housing and to address tenant landlord issues, like when someone's running a slum house, more a slumlord mostly.
Right.
And
Yeah.
there's one agency in Montana that lost 80% of their funding because of Doge cuts. So that means Montana, which already has very few resources because there's not a ton of people to begin with, if you are facing homelessness or dealing with a landlord dispute or whatever, this agency's basically gutted, and the federal agency that could have stepped in to help now also gone. So you're just shit out of luck in the middle of Montana. Good luck. And it's not just them, it's agencies throughout the country that disproportionately help fund seniors, disabled people, so that they can get housing, and low income families as well. Yeah, right,
Sheila
Shayla. And
makes a
then they
good
want to make
point too.
homelessness illegal.
Yeah. So like you're damned if you're so like you're breaking the law either way. Like it's like they're, and there's the libertarian group is where I get really like 0 to 100. I get wanting limited government. You cannot have like what they like what a lot of libertarians advocate for is not anything that can be a reality. Like, should it be should government be should we all be able to fund our own shit and everything be great? Yeah, it should be like that, but it's not. Like, and it's like you can spend it's kind of why USAID getting completely like cut, like really pissed me off, because like a lot of it affects farmers, and I fully believe there's a whole Trump wants to screw every farmer so big ag can buy up all the property on the cheap, but I digress. But, a lot of USAID is spending a little bit of money, like really pennies on the dollar, to build goodwill throughout the world. So it helps with our security. And not a lot of people really know that you're spending a little bit of money to save a lot in the long term. Like, the benefits of USAID often are not seen in the immediate. Like, you're not going to get results a year, 2 year, sometimes even within the 5 year. It's like the 20, 30, 40 years later that you really see the benefit that it would bring towards your country. I get not wanting to spend all this money in other places, but if we're going to be the richest, greatest country in the world, and I use that with quotation fingers, if we have to not just like look at the way humans are, to not get knocked off of our own pedestal that we put ourselves on. You need to prevent the attempts of getting knocked off. And a lot of times just spending a little bit of money ends up being a huge saver. And so what would you rather spend? Just a little bit of money building goodwill and helping hungry kids in Africa, or a lot of money when we have a terrorist attack because, we, ignore starving kids. Life doesn't stop because we say, okay, no more US. Well, oftentimes that's going to make your life a lot more unbearable because then you have to pay to fix shit. So, I don't know exactly. I don't have like a nice little wrap of what I just said, but libraries and these programs spend a little bit of money to prevent a huge amount of money having to be spent. And when you don't have some of these safety nets or just organizations that help underserved communities, you end up with a bigger problem. And that's where I get
really funny about what's really sad
about
that is if corporations weren't so profit driven and actually paid their workers a living wage, we wouldn't need all of the social safety nets. But because they want more profits, that's what happens. And then they complain about the social safety nets put in place. I mean, what is it? Walmart employees are the number one users of food stamps because they don't pay their workers worth of shit. Come on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you want if you want government out of everything, well, then you have to make it so that people have the ability to provide it for itself. Really, all we're doing at this moment as a country is creating a feudalistic system. That's really what it is. You have and it's not even an oligarchic system. Like, it really becomes you're dependent on an oligarch to live. Just like the Middle Ages when you had to depend on the Duke of whatever random place in Europe just to, like, you weren't saving anything. You weren't making any money. You were just scraping by at the bare minimum. That's it.
It's no accident that they cut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and these other agencies that help us fight big corporations when they try to screw the average American. It's no mistake that they did that because it's more and more money for the corporations and less for us. And that's why I'm sorry, it's a class war.
When's the war on greed going to start?
Yeah, Skip has a really good point. Libertarians are diet caffeine-free fash who want to privatize everything. Yeah. And what's crazy is that a lot of them really believe they're coming from a good place in it too. Like they really believe they're taking the self-righteous path. But if you just there's some libertarians that I just don't understand some of their thought. Okay, you don't want any income tax. I don't like paying taxes. Okay, let me just put that. But I also like to drive on roads that won't pop my tire, So let's say a bridge collapses in your town. How do you fix it if you don't have a tax pool to what are we going to crowdsource the repairs? How long, Mayor Pete got that, that bridge in Baltimore that the cargo ship ran into it and it that was like a main bridge that was needed for like major transport. He had it fixed in 2 weeks to get things moving again. And then, fixed in 2 weeks.
That
And
was in
things,
Philly,
I,
baby.
yeah. And so, like, how do you fix a bridge then if there's no tax revenue to pull from to fix the bridge? Are you expecting the construction workers to just do it out of the goodness of their hearts? Like, what are you expecting? How do you expect to pay for anything? Like, just basic things. And,
Well, in privatizing all these things, you can privatize all you want, but if your workers don't make any money, who's going to pay for it? No one's going to buy it.
yeah, yeah. And I'm sorry, like, privatizing is, great in theory, but a lot of times private companies try to sell you some bullshit. You know, asbestos was once a really great building material. You know what I'm saying? Like, what if we hadn't, what if it had, like, we hadn't discovered when we did that, hey, this ain't a good building material. Um, how long would it have taken if there was no government agency to start getting rid of this shit out of
Well,
um,
and I'm sure Bobby Brainworms thinks that some vitamin A will cure asbestos poisoning as well.
right? So like, it just in like I sometimes I believe these theories, these economic conversations, about privatizing everything. I do believe some come from a good place, but I just don't see how you can take yourself seriously in thinking that like everything can be privatized and you know the income tax is unconstitutional. Well, it's in the Constitution first of all, so Constitution says it's constitutional until the Constitution says it's not. You know what I'm saying? But like, you need to have some sort of tax pool for just to make this like if you want to not leave your home ever, great. Maybe you don't need an income, but most people want to like have to drive somewhere and need a flat you know, decent road for that car to travel on. So like, it I just don't see how you square the what is that phrase? How you uh round that round that peg or square whatever. You know what I mean. But um so yeah, I was really floored when I started seeing some of the wage gaps of and I've said this for probably about 15, 20 years. Anybody who's telling you not to get education likely wants to keep their foot on your neck in some way, shape, or form. um
Well, and the only reason
it
to limit access to information is because there's things there you don't want them to know. And if they don't want you to know, that means you probably do need to know because they're hiding something. So either it's the tools you could use to better yourself, or it's the tools you could use to overthrow them, or challenge them, or rise to their level. And that's what they don't want to see happen. Elsa, I wanted to
which
ask
is
you
so
about something
funny.
else. I
Oh,
know.
sure.
I wanted to ask you about something else. There is an article in the Kaufman Chronicles about the digital purge, and I'm hearing from some of the academic librarians that they're finding that some of the MedWeb and some of the others that there's articles disappearing off of it, and there's a concerted effort among academic librarians and archivists to try to reclaim some of this digital content that's going missing. Um, it's
I
tied in
haven't.
part. I'll send you the
Oh, go
article.
on. I'm sorry.
It's tied in part to the erasure of a lot of the federal websites that's going on, which that happens with every administration. They make some strategic changes, but these things are just flat out disappearing. And then now there's also limits on who they can publish with. Like the scientists aren't allowed to publish an article with the World Health Organization. And research on certain topics, of course, is being defunded, but you also risk some kind of backlash if there's certain terms used in it. So this happened with the Doge things. I don't know if they used AI or what, but it seems like a keyword search to find what they consider to be DEI related terms. But the problem is the English language has words that have multiple meanings and are used in multiple ways. So, for example, here in Pennsylvania, there was a program that is designed to help children, well, to help people transition from high school to the workforce. Because it had the word transition in it, it got cut by Doge, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with DEI, nothing to do with transgender or anything like that, but it uses the word transition. And so there's words being caught in this net that make no sense because that's just how English works. And it's terrifying, but that's what a lot of the they think that's where a lot of these articles are going missing as well, is they're catching key terms. Like, how can you write about cervical cancer without saying female or woman? But that word is now on his list of no words. Or saying gender. In a scientific article about there being a disparity between how a certain disease affects people based on gender, that's being squashed because that word's in there, but it's not about what they think it's about. It's about this general term that we use.
There's a great one that came up. The Air Force deleted the Enola Gay. And if you don't know what the Enola Gay is, they dropped the atom bomb on. It was the name of the plane that dropped the atom bomb on Hiroshima. So
Nick would like you to know that it was named after his mother. Not his mother, but the pilot's mother. There was
yeah, oh yeah,
yeah. There's another one because the Pentagon has ordered that they purge all their websites of any DEI language. It also caught an article about something, and I can't remember what it was about, but it was something completely non-related. But the person in the picture's last name was gay, and it's like, come on.
There was
like,
an author that got
use
banned.
Right. If you
for
want,
that.
if you want a keyword search, at least have someone go back and look and see if it was used in the way that you assumed it was before you just hit the delete button.
Yeah, I haven't seen that personally at my institution because we're not a big research institution. We have a good business school and a good nursing education program. We're also much smaller, so just by size alone, we wouldn't be. We're like but UGA is having some problems. Because they're an R1 institution for Georgia. With R1 institutions mean they receive hundreds of millions of dollars to not tax grants, research grants. They're doing the big research that comes out with like the big findings of stuff. The UGA works with the CDC. The CDC headquarters is in Atlanta, so they have a pretty, or they did. I don't know what's really happening with the CDC, but so infectious disease, a lot of that information gets, funded. So I'm sure UGA is, but what we are starting to, our DEI people are starting to, and our diversity department was actually commended by the state legislature last year for the way they, recruited, because that's really what DEI departments are. They're trying to expand the pool so you find the best talent in places you may not normally look. Is really the whole point of DEI in academia, at least. So you're expanding the talent pool versus just going to the same sources, job markets that, produce the same type of employee, whereas you can find way more qualified people possibly in other areas of the state, country, wherever, that you may not have without that assistance from the department. But so this was actually like 2 years ago where our college, we figured out we were under a really strict, they put like parental controls on our internet. So I started noticing that like really benign topics, like I would get error messages or, firewall, like you can't access this. And here's the thing, like we pay thousands upon thousands of dollars for databases. So you're burning money by doing this, but not everything, like you couldn't look up about Planned Parenthood. Well, not every reason a student on campus looking for the Planned Parent website is looking to have an abortion. They might need just general health. They might be researching about the history of Planned Parenthood. There might be, like in the health sciences, they might be doing some other, like, they need some sort of information from that website. So that's what they started doing. And then, so we had to get in, the library had to get and go to legal and be like, dude, like, WTF. So, but there still is, we can't prove it, but there is parental controls on our internet because things that, you shouldn't be getting a firewall message about, you get a firewall message. So we have that, and we've had that, but it's growing increasingly worse since the first time we figured out we had a parental control on our internet system, which, I'm sorry, if you're going to college, it's not 13th grade. These are grown adults. Adults. Okay. So, like, you should not be censoring information. And I wrote a whole article on why, me being like a law criminalizing librarians for inappropriate content to minors affects me is because we do have dual enrollment students who take college courses in high school. And then you also have, it's a, regardless if there's a university near you that receives public funding, that is a public institution, there's nothing stopping you from going to that library. It's a public library. Now, you may not be allowed to check out books. You might be, if you wanted to use a computer there, they might restrict your time, or students have first priority. But you're allowed to use that library because it's a public library, because it's funded with public tax dollars. Now, Yale University, their libraries don't have to let you in. They're a private institution. But any state education system has to let you use their library because it's a public library. And a reason why even academic libraries deal with homeless issues too, because we are a public, we're often a public library too. Just a lot of people don't think about it like that. So, yeah, I sorry I went off on a tangent about that, but just wanted to kind of, that's what we're dealing with in relation to that, what you were talking about with libraries.
Well, we are just over an hour. We got to do the plug stuff.
Oh yeah, okay. So let me get to the stuff. So all the sharing stuff. If you want to check out Project 2025, Project 2025's progress, this will bring you to a tracker bar, and it's really alarming to see how well they've done. With their little project. Here's our socials. So head to our Linktree / Library of Democracy. You'll also find links to the Tony Michaels podcast at the bottom in his Linktree. He totally helps us out with getting our stuff online. So we always like to thank him and make sure we plug him. Check out the Kaufman Chronicle Substack and the Library of Democracy Substack. For the Kaufman Chronicle is a great independent news source that if you're looking for stories that the mainstream isn't covering, check out the Kaufman Chronicle. Library of Democracy focuses more a little bit, not just necessarily education, but where politics and education meet, and why it's in our best interest as a country to fund our libraries and schools, and show how they're kitchen table issues, not just the idea of a library is great. They help. They're the great equalizer when it comes to information. So, do you have anything to add? Did I forget anything? Or
No, you hit them all. You remembered, and Skip was telling everybody before to like, subscribe, and share, and all that fun stuff that we always forget to say. Thank you for reminding us.
Oh, yes, and hit the like button, subscribe. It really does help out the algorithm. It helps compound, get our message out. And people need to know, like, libraries aren't just nice things to have. They're essential to a community's success. So
And we were also
I
wondering
think,
if the Sunday time frame is better for some people.
I'm sorry. Oh yeah. So one thing we also wanted to know is I started noticing that way more people view it on Sunday. So um, maybe we should put like one of those polls up in the community section of YouTube. But we're thinking about moving it to 4 p.m. on Sundays. Let us know if you think that's a bad idea, good idea. It's probably a lot less a better time for us to do it too. So, let us know. And I
Allison,
think,
Derek put the link to that digital purge article in the chat if you want to look at it sometime.
okay. All right, I'll put that in the description when we get off, because I can't walk and chew gum. Everybody will just watch me start struggling to see things on the screen. Okay, so with that said, I hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and we will catch you on the next one. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Enjoy the rest.